Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about bump handling. So obviously it's not always grip that means you can't go faster. It's not always sort of, steering or rear end traction. Sometimes you're just waiting for your car over bumps. You sort of don't know what it's going to do. You're hitting a bump and it's sort of pinging offline and you just want it to be more stable, suck to the track so that you know where it's going to go and it sort of handles a bit more predictably. So yeah, I've got 10 things that might help with that, so we'll get straight into it. Okay, so thing one, ride height. So with ride height, what you want to do if your car's sort of bad on, especially big bumps and you're sort of in maybe a lower grip scenario, you can raise your ride height. Now, raising your ride height, what that does is basically lift your chassis further away from the bumps. The reason that helps is because a lot of the time, what's actually happening is if they're sort of quite big bumps like we have in the UK on our outdoor tracks, it can actually be your chassis hitting the bumps, which really makes your car sort of take off and do something crazy. So yeah, especially good for lower grip. Obviously if it's higher grip, you don't want to just be raising your car up for no reason. But yeah, sort of lower grip, bigger bumps, raising your ride height is a very, very good option. Next thing is towing. So towing, especially sort of longer corners with bumps in them, what can happen if you have too much towing is it's almost like the two wheels start fighting each other. So your car kind of is bouncing over bumps and you sort of, your car almost starts to wobble from side to side. This can especially happen when you're on power on bumps as well. Your car can really start to sort of wobble from side to side. And it's basically the two tyres just fighting for which one's in control. And that can really sometimes send your car into a right wobble. You don't know where it's going to go. Yeah, it's not useful. Also, obviously, if you've got more toe in and your car's kind of sliding slightly around a corner, that outside tyre is going to be hitting the bump at a more sideways angle, which can obviously have a bigger effect on what your car does. So yeah, this is a good one for higher grip, sort of sweepier tracks. Obviously, again, if it's low grip, you don't really want to be taking toe off your car, it's going to make it worse in a lot of other ways. But yeah, if you think it's sort of a high grip, sweepy track, you feel like you could get away with reducing towing, and you're kind of struggling in sweeping corners with your car just being a little bit unstable, you're not quite sure what it's going to do, reducing the towing might be a good idea. Thing three is hexes. So with the hexes, what you want to do is, it's kind of a similar scenario to tow, sort of sweeping corners, higher grip. Wider hexes are going to help you on the front and rear of any car. The reason for that is, obviously, for one, it kind of makes your car wider, which just generally is going to stabilise your car, sort of reduce the load transfer, make it a bit more stable in that way. But also, wider hexes allow the suspension to move more easily as you've got a big side load on your tyres. So yeah, again, sweeping, high grip corners, wider hexes are just going to allow your suspension to move more easily. Your car's going to be less sort of stiff and bouncy off the bumps, and it will sort of allow your car to sort of roll into them and take them in a more consistent way. So yeah, wider hex is a similar scenario to tow, sort of higher grip, sort of corner bumps is where it's going to help. But yeah, give it a go. The next one is springs. So springs, you probably know this one already, I guess, but softer springs is definitely going to help you on bumps in almost all conditions, really. So what that does, allows your wheels to basically follow the ground a bit better. You take a shock into your tyre, it's not going to move the car actually as much. And yeah, basically just allows your suspension to move more easily, having softer springs on your car. The other thing that makes a good difference is having like a lower frequency spring. So if you're still running like the old 12mm springs, the V2 springs, something like that, the 13mm springs will help you there because the rear spring has a slightly thicker wire on it. It's going to help you on the bumps as well. Basically, the lower frequency spring just doesn't react as quickly almost. It's kind of what it feels like. So, yeah, helps your car on the bumps in that way as well. Okay, on from springs, we have shocks. So with shocks, you've obviously got pistons, and then you've just got the oil itself as well. So what can you do with pistons, first of all? So pistons, basically what you're going to aim to do to help with bumps is reduce the pack. So there's multiple ways of doing that. You can have bigger holes in your pistons, so you could say drill them out to 0.1 bigger than what they are, and then go up slightly in the oil to compensate for that. You could go to thinner pistons, things like that. So there's multiple ways of just reducing the pack in your shocks, not necessarily changing how thick the car is initially, but basically as you hit a bump and the speed of that shock increases, it won't increase the damping as much effectively. So it just allows your wheels to react to bumps more easily in that way. The other thing with the shocks is obviously just the oil that's in them. So it could be that it's not that the shock's ramping up too much, it could just be that it's too stiff in the first place. So you're hitting a bump, the shock can't move, it just moves your whole car. Not ideal. So yeah, that's one of those things you kind of just get a feel for what thickness is sort of right in your shocks. It could be that if you are really struggling on bumps or something, you just feel a few other people's cars, something like that. And that way you kind of understand, maybe my car feels a bit too thick, and that's why it's just bouncing off the bump, something as simple as that. So that's the other thing. Another thing with shocks I've just thought of is shock positions as well. So obviously you've got, on the arms, you've got like inner, middle, and the outer hole. So what can also improve the bump handling is to run your shocks further in on the arm. What that does is it reduces the speed of the piston inside your shock. So what that does if you don't change the pistons is reduces the amount of pack that you have, because the piston's not moving as fast. But even if you readjust the pack, it still kind of helps your car just deal with the bumps a little bit better, since that piston's not shooting through your shock as fast when you hit a bump. So yeah, that's another thing that's going to help you. The other thing that can help on the bumps is having lower roll centers both ends. So lower roll centers, what's that going to do? If your roll center's too high in the corners, what's going to happen is, as your car's sort of got load on it sideways, it's sort of pulling some G-force through the corners, it's going to stiffen up your suspension having a higher roll center. And obviously, we've just sort of talked about how softer suspension is going to allow sort of your tyres to move more easily, and it's not going to affect your car as much. So yeah, if you have lower roll centers, how can you achieve that? You can add shims under your ball studs on the inside. Here, that will lower your roll center. The other ways you can do it is lowering your arms at the inside, your suspension arm. So on the front, that could be adding some bulkhead shims. At the rear, that's just lowering your hinge pin down on the pills. Yeah, lower roll centers again. It's going to allow your car to sort of roll more into the corners. It's not going to put as much sort of load into the tyres, and they're not going to react as harshly off the bumps. It's going to allow your car to sort of roll more downwards and just let the suspension do the work. Next thing is anti-squat and kick-up. So first of all, we'll just talk about anti-squat. So what anti-squat does is when your car is on power, you're putting power through your rear tyres, it stops the rear end of your car squatting down. The way it does that is basically by stiffening up the geometry so that your suspension can't move. So that's going to make it worse on the bumps. So if you reduce your anti-squat, your car will be better on the bumps on power. Basically, your tyres will just be able to move more freely and deal with the bumps. So this one's especially sort of on power bumps. It's going to help the rear end be more settled down. Now kick up, this one's sort of especially important on four-wheel, although it does help on two-wheel drive as well. But four-wheel drive, sort of the exact opposite of anti-squat. If you have more kick-up, that allows the front suspension to move more as you're on the brakes, and basically makes your car better on the bumps. If you have less kick-up, that stiffens the geometry on the brakes, stiffens up the whole front end, and the tyres can't react to the bumps as easily. So yeah, to improve the car on the bumps on power, you're going to reduce the anti-squat, and to improve the car on the brakes, like on a four-wheel drive, the front end on the brakes, you're going to increase the kick-up. The next thing is adding weight. So when you add weight to your car, it basically makes it react less to everything. So it reacts less to sort of sudden changes in grip, reacts less to you turning, reacts a bit less to you accelerating, and also reacts less to bumps. It's a heavier mass of car, so obviously as your tyre hits a bump, it's going to take more to move that car off its course. So basically it's just going to be flatter over, even just straight line bumps, it will take more easily. Also, you've got the effect of in corners. Since your car is less reactive to everything, say your front tyres suddenly hit a bump and grip up, that's not going to change the direction of your car as quickly, because again, it's more weight to move in that direction. So even if you are kind of hitting bumps sort of as you're cornering, it's going to take more of a bump to sort of destabilise what path that car is on. So yeah, adding more weight helps in a few ways on bumpy tracks. Again, the disadvantage of that is if you're in a lower grip scenario, you're going to just sort of feel like you've got less rear grip out of corners, your car's not going to turn in as well, all just because it's a heavier amount of weight to change direction, basically. So yeah, higher grip, bumpy tracks, again, more weight is going to help you. The last thing that can help you is basically reducing how much steering you have, reducing how much front end is in your car. So with bumps, again, you don't want to be hitting them sideways. That definitely doesn't help, is the first thing. So if you're coming through a corner and your car's sort of in a bit of a drift, you've flicked the steering and it's kind of put your car a bit sideways, that means that as the rear and front are catching bumps, your car's really going to change direction and make it quite unpredictable to drive. It's going to be much more predictable in bumpy scenarios if you're sort of having a slight understeer around the track so that you're hitting bumps in a straight line and you know where you're going. The other effect is kind of like I just spoke about with the weight. If your front end is, you imagine you're turning and you're sort of going over a bumpy scenario. As you hit bumps, you're going to gain grip on the front end, like as you hit a bump. If you have less steering, sort of less grip at the front, that's, again, less going to affect what direction your car's going in, and it's going to make it easier to drive. So it can just be the case on sort of bumpy conditions if you're struggling, that your car's just a bit too aggressive. It makes it much more difficult in those scenarios to sort of pick your line and know where you're going. So yeah, that is the last thing. So that's it. That's the 10 things. Hopefully that can help you if you find yourself on a bumpy track at some point and you get a little bit lost, you're not sure what to do. There's 10 ideas for you to try out and sort of figure out what's going to work in your scenario. If you live in the UK and you fancy like a carpet car for winter or something like that built by us, check out our website below. We can build a kit for you basically however you want it. Yeah, we'll see you in the next one.